Hey everybody, today I'm going to shoot a video that's a little different than the kind I normally shoot. I'm going to do a little bit of a how-to video. I'm going to show you how I'm applying all of the silicone sealing my waterfall here. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about the kind of silicone I'm going to use, because I'm using GE Silicone number 2. And I know it's going to cause a lot of controversy. I know I'm going to get a ton of comments about how I can't use that and it's going to kill my fish, and so on and so forth, and that's simply not true. GE Silicone number 2 is perfectly safe to use in your aquarium if you use it properly, but the same can be said for any type of silicone. So before you rush to the comment section, hear me out. I'll explain. Most of the controversy over the Silicone number 2 is from right there. It says mold free. Hoping you can read that. That mold-free label right there is what all of the fear comes from. It gives the impression that there's some sort of added ingredient in there, because it simply doesn't say that on the Silicone number 1. It only says it on the GE Silicone number 2. However, there's nothing in it. There's no additives, there's no nothing. It is simply silicone. If you look at the MSDS or the Material Safety Data Sheet, there's nothing in here. There's no additional fungicides or nothing. It's just simply silicone. The main differences between Silicone number 1 and Silicone number 2 is the way it cures. There are some other minor differences, and we'll get into that in a minute. That's actually why I like using Silicone number 2 as opposed to Silicone number 1. But when Silicone number 1 cures, it produces acetic acid, which is effectively vinegar. So working with it indoors in an environment like this is really unpleasant, even with adequate ventilation, as you're going to see in my next video where we actually do the demonstration of how I'm going to use it. I will be using large amounts of it, and when you've got a big pile of it curing and it's the GE Silicone number 1, it produces a lot of fumes and it's really unpleasant to work with indoors. GE Silicone number 2 is an acetose. Not exactly sure how to pronounce it, and I'm not exactly sure the chemistry behind it, but it's got a different curing process, and it releases different gases as it cures. It's low fume, it's low odor, it doesn't stink up my house, it's not unpleasant to work with, and it cures in about the same time as the GE Silicone number 1 does, just without all those nasty fumes and everything else. The other differences between the two is Silicone number 1 is really good for binding glass to glass. So if you're building an aquarium, the Silicone number 1 is definitely what you want to go with, even if you've got to deal with the ventilation or whatever. The glass to glass bond with Silicone number 1 is really strong. Silicone number 1 does not bond well with other materials. Silicone number 2, however, doesn't bond well to glass, but it does bond other materials very well. Now the only exception is acrylic. Neither of them bond well to acrylic, so it doesn't really matter when it comes to acrylic. Neither Silicone number 1 or 2 will bond well to acrylic. Now acrylic is also not the same as, don't have a sheet of it handy right here, but the Lexan or polycarbonate is not the same as acrylic. So this GE Silicone number 2 will bond to polycarbonate or Lexan very well, and that's why I like using it. I'm using it on this non-glass material, and I'm using it as a thick sealant. I need something that's going to bond really well. I'm working with it indoors, so I need something that's going to be low odor and low fume, and the Silicone number 2 just meets the bill for all of that stuff. The only thing you need to worry about is making sure it is fully cured before you start putting fish in the water, but the same has to be said for Silicone number 1. You can't use that until it's fully cured, and even though it says it's waterproof in 30 minutes, you really need to wait at least 24 hours. I usually give it 48 to really be sure it's fully cured. And once this Silicone number 2 is fully cured, it's no different. It's just silicone rubber. It's completely harmless to your aquarium. It's completely safe to use in your fish tanks. You can use it in your reef aquariums. You can use it in your sumps. It's harmless. Just make sure you cure it properly. The only downside to using either of these is that it's a non-paintable surface. And that's where I'm running into issues with my waterfall setup here that I'm building, is I need a paintable surface, because I don't want that sort of white clear look you get, you know, the seam in the corner of an aquarium is that sort of whitish clear look. That's how this will cure, and I don't want that look on my waterfall, but I also can't paint this. I do have a clever way around that, and the solution to that will be in my next video. That's going to be the actual how-to where I'm applying it. I'm going to show you how I prepare it, I'm going to show you how I apply it, and then if you subscribe and you follow along over time, you will see that the fish that will be living in this environment will be just fine, despite the fact that I'm going to be using several tubes of this to completely coat my waterfall, which will then be flowing into the tank that's going to be full of happy, healthy, living fish, because silicone number 2 is perfectly safe to use in your aquarium. It's just a myth that it's dangerous. So don't worry about that. Use it. Make sure it's cured properly. Use it when it's appropriate. If you're doing glass to glass, use silicone number 1. If you're doing other materials and you need a sealant or you need things bonded together, silicone number 2 is going to be your way to go. The next video, as I said, is going to be the actual application. So make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss that or anything else. Thanks for watching this one. I hope that cleared it up. Don't forget to put any comments down below in the comment section. I'm sure I'm going to hear lots of people disagreeing with me or whatever, but if you can show me some science that backs up your claims that this is dangerous to use, I would appreciate that as well, because I know everybody says you can't use this, but I don't really care what everybody says. Science and my own experience says that you can use this because it's perfectly safe. So go ahead, hit me up with your comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you real soon in the next one. Thanks again.